AAT Birds Weekly Report is the Eagle news, notes, and analysis you need.
Quick, he's going to go. What a give it to Smith, and they stop him again. Go back. He looks, fires for the end zone, intercepted, the 20, the 10, the 5, touchdown, Matt Ware, midfield, he's going to go, Deshaun Jackson. He steps up his head and falls forward, and he fumbles the football, and the Eagles have it, it's gone, and the Eagles win.
It's all birds, all the time.
And welcome to another edition of the AAT Birds Weekly Report. On myself, Johnny Uleka, is joined as always by Chip at Chip for the Birds. We're going to talk a little bit about Eagles coordinating their coaches, and they are getting the OC and DC are official, which is, well, I'm not sure if getting those two guys in, we're going to discuss that. We did mention a little bit about Vic Fangio last show, just because it was kind of rumored with him, kind of getting out of his contract in Miami, and then everything pointed towards the top priority of the Eagles was Fangio. So
yeah, it was as close to final last Wednesday night as it could have been.
Yeah, and of course the Eagles, there's a couple of things going on, and I want to touch on these coordinator hiring for most of the show, but there's also, they did do a couple position coaches, which is very interesting. And then also at the Senior Bowl, there is just no position coaches, which you usually see some coaches going there. And, that's a telltale sign in terms of this whole coaching shakeup. The whole, the staff's going to be different. And in terms, it may be a good thing. And, start off here looking at a guy like Vic Fangio, and you get him. He's official. He's on the books as your Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator. And my really thing about it is looking at what he's done as a defensive coordinator with his time. I'm not really going too far back when he was with Carolina and Houston, and I don't want to look at that. I want to look at recently, the last, I would say, 13 years, when he was with San Francisco, and he was with the Bears, and he was with the Broncos, and then the Dolphins. Now, the Broncos, he was the head coach.
Right.
But I think one telltale thing, when you look at his stats with all these teams, he has usually one or two really absolute stellar seasons as a defensive coordinator. And I think the big thing with him as a defensive coordinator is he's never really had a very, very top flight quarterback or a very good quarterback. Right. Yeah, Tua's had his issues. You had Joe Flacco, Drew Lock. Yeah, they had Colin Kaepernick, which, for that system and what they ran there with I think it was Greg Roman at that point, but with Harbaugh and everything, it was a run first type of offense, and it really meshed well. And that was his big time success. And then they had Trubisky in Chicago. So, he gets a quarterback like Jalen Hurts and in this offense to pair it with his to be done. But I love the hire. I know I was a little against, another Fangio guy, but like we mentioned, if you're going to get somebody, you get the architect.
If you're going to commit to the Fangio style of defense, then who better to try to run it than Vic Fangio himself? I agree that, there's a lot of things. I don't want Eagles fans to look at this most recent season of him coaching, which of course was with the Miami Dolphins, and judge him based on his numbers from Miami. If you look at that Miami team, they were absolutely decimated with injuries, especially on the defense, constantly. But again, I think that, and I said this last week, I think that when you look, and Johnny's pulling up the numbers now, you can see that when he's got a healthy team, I think that's the way it kind of always is. When you have a healthy team, it shows you something. But I think the big thing with it didn't matter who they brought in, and I said this last week, is the personnel has to be right. this Eagles defense needs an overhaul in certain areas, and they have to commit to certain positions. If you look at the last 4 teams, they all committed to the linebacking core, right? If you look at the last 4 teams in the NFL this season, they all committed to the linebacking core. If you look at the 2 teams in the Super Bowl, they both have really phenomenal linebacking cores, or at least good quality linebacking cores in the Chiefs case. I think that they're a little better than that. But again, this Eagles team has never really committed to that one specific position. And if you look at the NFC East overall, there's not really elite. I mean, there's Micah Parsons, who's more of an edge rusher than anything. But I think that could be one of the X factors when it comes to trying to be above any other team right now, especially in the NFC East, which your goal has to be now to win the NFC East again next year. Vic Fangio, whatever his scheme may be, he's got to have the right personnel to run it. And I think that's going to include making the secondary younger. I think it's going to include getting actual pass rush from your defensive line. And I think you have to have good to great quality linebacking play.
Yeah, no, it's going to be that. I think you hit it right with, secondary getting younger. You have a guy that, in Carl Scott, who, he came from Seattle. He was with Alabama. He's been with a couple of these guys. There's a couple of guys in the draft that he worked with as well. And getting younger in the secondary is huge. You look at, Eli Ricks and Keely Ringo, and you have a guy that once he gets reinstated, and Isaiah Rodgers, a 26-year-old defensive back.
Yeah.
You got a little bit there to work with. Now, of course, there still needs to be done. I still think you need to have a free agent safety edition here. There's a number of them, especially some guys that have actually worked with Scott in Alabama. So, there's that I'd love to see.
There's even guys that are going to be available for free agency in the cornerback position, depending on what happens. I think about like L'Jarius Sneed. You think about what happens with him. If he doesn't re-up, I mean, he should be a top candidate. And I saw some, again, we talk about this all the time, where there are media organizations that put out really stupid ideas. And one of them happened, of course, this week, which is, would you trade A.J. Brown for Patrick Surtain? To which my answer is an absolute no.
Sorry, absolutely.
It's an absolute no. Patrick Surtain, it would be a phenomenal little addition. I wouldn't complain about that addition. But I think the fact of people trying to now get rid of A.J. Brown is moronic.
It's stupid
for whatever reason may be. But I do think that they have to get younger, and they have to do it in a way where it's not on a rental. It's not on a 1-year prove 'em deal. Like, we've done that a lot. We look at some of the guys we've brought in, they're all on these 1-year prove it deals. And like with Bradbury, he was on a 1-year prove it deal. And then because of what happened with CJ Gardner-Johnson, him going to the Lions, the Eagles kind of settled in on Bradbury. Well, that doesn't work. You look at, who's the safety that we had a couple years ago, whose name I'm blanking on?
McLeod, Jenkins.
No, they were all there for a while. The 1-year guy. I want to say Harris.
Oh.
No.
Yeah, Anthony Harris from Minnesota.
Anthony Harris, right? He was on a 1-year prove deal, played pretty well, but again, he showed his age. So I think that you got a guy like Sidney Brown. Sidney Brown played much better than expected in his first year. I think you look at a guy like, you look at Ricks, you look at Ringo. These are guys that need to be developed. And I think that the most important thing that Vic Fangio can do is teach these players how to play the game.
Yeah, and there was something that came out. I believe it was Barrett Brooks was talking with Dante Whitner, who is an analyst over at NBC San Francisco, I believe, or NBC Bay Area for the 49ers. And he was on the defense when Vic Fangio was in San Francisco as his coach. And his main thing talking about it was, Drew Rosenhaus came out and said that the players didn't like him or whatever. And what Whitner said is, if you listen to the man speak and you listen to his coaching and you take in his coaching and you put it out on the field there, you're going to be successful. The ones that don't want to do that are the ones that are crying. And the ones, and even Jaws said it on the radio, I think it was yesterday, mentioned about, the players who were, whining that they don't want to put the full effort in it. When you don't have that and you aren't able to do that, I'm sorry, but listen, it's
And like even for me, and I love the comments that are rolling in. DJ saying the secondary needs to be revamped. Cut Bayard, Bradbury, and Maddox. Time for the youngest to develop. Here's the thing: Maddox was always supposed to be a slot guy, and I think as a slot corner, he does really well. But that is a spot now where we could move on if there is somebody better suited for the position. Bradbury, we all agree, is a cut. I think with the Sidney Brown injury, I think you almost have to keep Kevin Byard. But again, I'm not set on it. With Blankenship's inability to stay on the field, I'm not set on it. But I think that the other thing, and talking about the likability factor and how whether or not they like Vic Fangio and all, here's the thing: I don't really care. If you want your rah-rah, we like you guy, that's who Nick Sirianni has kind of turned out to be. But as far as coaching the positions and coaching the game, give me a guy like Vic Fangio. Give me a guy that's going to teach that toughness on how to play and how to win in this league.
Yeah, no, and he's shown that he has the proven track record to do that. And, this defense, we know the defense needs some retooling. We know that there's some pieces there that, Fangio can work with Jordan Davis and, Jalen Carter and Milton Williams. And you have some secondary pieces, some young kids to see what they have. But you need to go into free agency to be able to get some of these guys. And the draft, you have 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. You need to be able to retool this team.
Retool. And even so, like the other thing that I really liked, and, as we're kind of spending a good amount of time on the defense right now, is I loved the additions that they brought in to surround Vic Fangio. Like Clint Hurt.
Yeah.
Clint Hurt might end up being the Jeff Stoutland of this defense. Because one of the things that he said, and I really loved, is I don't want to see big guys running backwards. He said that today. I don't want to see big guys running backwards. And again, it's the logic of,
it's funny you have that quote because Boye Mafe, which is one of the edge rushers for the Seahawks last year of a team that he was defensive coordinator, he dropped back 19% of the time.
Right. So, and I think for me, it's the edge rusher. Like sometimes they're going to blitz, sometimes they're going to go into coverage. I'm less worried about that. I'm talking about like our D linemen. Like there were times where, if Fletcher Cox had to drop back in coverage because they were blitzing a linebacker, like there are so many times where the defense literally did not know what to do. And there was such a disconnect between Desai's work and Patricia's work and what the overall scheme was. I just think that there needs to be a more unified voice. And I think that's where Vic Fangio is. This is my defense. And then the other guys that they're bringing in go, okay, how are we going to help? The fact that our defensive backs coach and our defensive line coach have already worked together, that says a lot.
Oh, yeah. And, Fangio is going to be able to pull some coaches that he's worked with. I know they've interviewed Mike Caldwell and Joe Barry.
Yeah.
Linebackers coach, which are, if they can get one of those guys, they're huge because both those guys are, veteran coaches, big time veteran coaches, and they develop linebackers. And there's numerous linebackers that they've developed and a few linebackers that they've developed who are free agents as well. So there's something to that as well. When you look at, and I think that's one thing that we'll get into in future shows. When you look at the needs on this Eagles defense, there are pieces in free agency that they can be able to sign. And listen, I know there's a lot of, back and forth on Twitter or Facebook or whatever it is, and about the Eagles going after a safety, and they don't prioritize this position. They don't do that. Well, 2022, they tried to get Marcus Williams, who wind up signing with the Baltimore Ravens. They were basically number 2 out of, he was the former Saints safety. They got a huge deal with the Ravens, and the Eagles missed out, which again prompted the Eagles to trade for CJ Gardner-Johnson.
Yep.
So,
which was a great deal.
Yeah. And listen, they have prioritized safety. They've signed guys like Rodney McLeod. Yeah, it wasn't the top free agent. They signed Malcolm Jenkins. Yeah, he wasn't the top guy. Luckily, they didn't go for the top guy, Jarius Byrd, who wasn't very good. But
even when they go out and they go get a guy, like Anthony Harris. Anthony Harris was a good safety in this league whose job was to fill a responsibility. I'm actually not as worried about the safety position. I'm worried about the corner position, but the safety position has really been pretty good. And again, there's a lot of back and forth right now going between DJ and Max talking specifically about Kevin Byard. You know, Max saying that we shouldn't get rid of Kevin Byard. He's a great player. He came to idea.
You can restructure him and save $9 million if you really need to keep him, depending on Sidney Brown's recovery.
Yep.
If you have to, you can keep him, but restructure him and get some saving.
The Sidney Brown recovery is going to be key because Sidney Brown, I think personally, did enough to earn the starting job in 2024. But we also know that Howie is a cap wizard, and you know, DJ saying $14 million in cap savings. If that's actually the case, then you know Howie's going to say, "Listen, you're worth $14 million, so we can either restructure this or we can save $14 million."
Plus, it also gives like Byard isn't the player he was, but it also gives him an off season to learn this defense, to be in that room, to be here for and I think that's big too. If you really think about it, you know, if you're able to restructure him, keep him, you still save, you know, $9 million towards the cap. It's still something, and you still have a veteran on the back end because, like you've mentioned, Reed Blankenship has been hurt numerous times the last couple seasons, so you need to have veterans back there. And you know, whatever it may be, whatever they do, you know, Avonte Maddox, you could cut him post June 1 and you have save money there. Or
that's the thing.
Does he take a pay cut and stay with them? So there's a lot of things going on that they could possibly do.
Right. And I think, you know, you mentioned like Sidney Brown played really, really well until he got hurt. The fact that he made those leaps in the first year was impressive. Yeah, DJ, I agree. The defense is a huge priority this season. I think offense is going to get fixed because play calling is going to be better. But the defense, there was no understanding of defensive scheme. So they are literally starting from scratch as far as learning how to play a defense. HD Line Grinder saying Sydney's going to be the next Palomalu / Dawkins. Philadelphia, we say Dawkins / Palomalu, which is great. Andrew saying Bradbury needs to go. I'll eat that cap. I'll start Rod. Listen, agreed. Bradbury played so poorly. Max saying priority is getting a linebacker, replacing Bradbury and adding depth. And then, Maddox can't stay healthy. Look, Avonte Maddox was only supposed to be the nickel corner. Like when you look at the way the roster was constructed this year, it was supposed to be Slay at the 1, Bradbury at the 1A, and Maddox at the slot corner. And as the injuries started happening, that didn't happen. So it didn't go according to plan, and then only to find out that there wasn't really a defensive scheme and a defensive plan. So I think that the defense is kind of like everybody's saying right now, there's a big overhaul about to happen, and it's okay that it's happening.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean like, listen, if you sign 3 to 4 starters in free agency to play on this defense, doesn't mean the defense is going to be just as bad. You know, you can upgrade in free agency. If you get a guy who was 1, been in the scheme before, 2, knows Vic Fangio and this defense, those things matter. And they mean a lot when you have these guys. And you usually see that when you have new guys coming in.
Yep.
You know, you see that aspect of it. And listen, the Fangio scheme is different. They do prioritize, you know, post snap to be able to move the secondary, you know, manipulate the defense. And, you know, the one big thing is when you look at the Shanahan, McVay, all that, the one thing that Fangio does is when these quarterbacks do the play action, their defense switches basically when their back is turned to the defense. Like the coverage will switch at that point. So when the quarterback comes back, the coverage is totally different than what he thought he saw. And again, that's where you can get your pass rush. If your pass rush is getting home, that extra half second to a second to be able to get to the quarterback. So I think a lot of those things matter as well. And, you know, it's going to be fun to see how they build this team, how they maneuver, because they're going to have some money to be able to do stuff. They're not going to be right up against the cap. Yeah, they do have some extensions to do in terms of, do they extend Hassan Reddick? What do they do with Josh Sweat? You know, Dickerson and Smitty are both eligible for extension. So there's some maneuvering that needs to be done. But again, there will be cap space. There will be stuff for them to focus on free agency and to be able to focus on this defense to be able to upgrade it. And even the offense, there's certain positions in the offense they can upgrade to. But again, that's why you have free agency. Then you have the draft. And then you're able to, you know, build your team through those two
and
avenues.
I think the other thing that we're waiting for, and the first thing that you always wait for, is the official announcement of who's going to be retiring and who's not. Like, we have some names on both sides of the ball that are absolutely Philadelphia legends, and honestly still playing towards the top of their game and top of their position group. However, that's a lot of money. So are they willing to be both a roster spot and a cap hit for limited amount of playing time? Like, to me, if I'm ranking the order in which I wish players wouldn't retire, I think that I would love to see Jason Kelce one more year, followed by Brandon Graham, followed by Fletcher Cox. I think that out of all three position groups, that Fletcher Cox is the most ready to be replaced, because we do have young guys already pretty dominant in the position. But I think we still need more edge rushers, where Brandon Graham was finding success. And honestly, there's still no better center in the league, in my opinion.
No, you're absolutely right. And, you're speaking about, talk about the center and the offensive side of the ball. Let's get into the Kellen Moore stuff. Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator. And I love the addition for what you had that was out there. He will go under center. He will use motion. He will scheme his receivers open. He used the middle of the field. There is a misnomer that he doesn't run the ball, when the Cowboys were basically top 8 in rushing attempts at 2 out of the 4 years. And otherwise they were in the middle of the pack in the NFL. So it's not like he totally forgets the run. I think it's an absolute slam dunk of a hire, because he has called plays before. He's played, Dak Prescott, elevated Dak Prescott's game. Yeah. He's going to have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts to be able to help elevate his game. I think, like I said, I think it is an absolute win-win. And I think it needs to be said that it's a win-win. I know it's a former Cowboy coordinator.
And that's where a lot of people are doing how dare you bring the enemy into, like, and I understand that logic. And I understand that Kellen Moore was, quite honestly, such a hot name as almost being the Cowboys' next head coach after Jason Garrett was kind of gone, after, the first time that it looked like, what's his name? McCarthy was kind of on the outs. I like the hiring of Kellen Moore. I think that when you look at specifically what he did over in wherever the Chargers play now, they're still San Diego, right?
Los Angeles.
Well, I know I'm messing with you. I just want to make sure your unmute button worked. Yeah. I mean, you had a guy like Justin Herbert who could throw the ball. You had tight ends. You had phenomenal running backs in Austin Eckler. You had great wide receivers in Keenan Allen. Like, you had players, and the Philadelphia Eagles offense is chock full of playmakers that are being grossly underutilized. And when you looked at the way that Brian Johnson / Nick Sirianni called plays, because we still don't know about all that, and I want to talk about that, kind of the moving forward steps pretty soon. There was no scheme. There was no scheme. It was not effective. I mean, we've all seen the diagram where the entire middle of the field was wide open in the playoff game. Literally, hash mark to hash mark was wide open. There was not a player, offensive or defensive player, in sight. We talked about the uncreative route trees. I mean, I think that Kellen Moore, no matter who they hired, was going to be a better addition. And I just think that Kellen Moore is going to be more aggressive when it comes to getting the best out of Jalen Hurts. And Max, that was kind of the point I was trying to dance around. The Chargers had a really bad year because Austin Eckler, he wasn't at his best. Herbert didn't play a good chunk of the season. The wide receivers were on and off healthy. And still, when you look at it, they had a couple of guys who you literally could not tell me their names before the season started. And they went off for 100 yards, 150 yards at a random time. So, yeah, here you go. Easton Stick, was this their last game that they played?
No, this was the second last game. You have Easton Stick at quarterback.
Easton Stick, Austin Eckler, Alex Erickson, Darius Davis, Quentin Johnson, Gerald Everett, and then some linemen.
And they were missing, I think, 2 linemen, I believe. 2 linemen were out as well. So
when we talk about what Kellen Moore was able to get out of that team, also with a head coach that had been fired, right? So,
yes.
Right. So there was already the idea of the rebuild.
Yeah.
So I just think that Kellen Moore is a good hire. I think that they, as DJ's saying here, I think that, the route trees are going to be much more creative. I think that if you look at it was a tale of 2 seasons for A.J. Brown, where A.J. Brown had an incredible first half of the season And when they were able to get him the ball consistently, Jalen Hurts was an MVP candidate. And then all of a sudden, they just stopped getting A.J. Brown the ball. And the entire offense fell off. I think that if Kellen Moore has both of those options, along with whoever we're going to bring in to be wide receiver 3, and that is a conversation as well because you have to bring somebody in.
Yeah.
Along with Dallas Goedert actually being able to be utilized in the I honestly feel more than anything, and I'm the first person to say that I don't think Dallas Goedert is a next level tight end yet. Kellen Moore does a really good job involving tight ends.
Yeah.
This could be the year that Dallas Goedert takes that step.
Yeah, it's going to be huge. It's going to be absolutely huge to be able to see what they do with that offensive side of the ball and Kellen Moore in this Eagles offense. I'm really excited to see how they use the tight end, how they use the wide receiver 3 and the running back, everything like that.
Yeah, and I would really like to make sure that we re-sign DeAndre Swift. I think that he had a good enough season where he's earned to stay where he wants to stay. And I know that, again, talking about running backs, and we're not big to invest on running backs, but we've got to stop relying on the running game through Jalen Hurts. Like, he is not your primary runner. And you also have to stop relying on the running game with Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell. So I just think that, there are obviously additions that we have to bring in. But we do still have some pieces there as well. So do I think Swift comes back? I honestly, I do. I think that it's going to be on a much more team-friendly deal than it is going to be for a necessarily Swift-friendly deal. I think you could also even almost see him doing much more of him doing a prove it deal almost. But at the same time, I mean, Swift was the best running back we had on the roster, no question. Max saying, I wouldn't mind seeing the Eagles go to a solid tight end 2 to get some pressure off Goddard. Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm going to be very, very honest. When Goddard wasn't there, we didn't have any NFL caliber tight ends on our team. Agree completely on Hurts not being the main running threat. Yeah, I mean, I think that when you looked as the season progressed, and Jalen Hurts played a whole season, which was phenomenal, but he got the crap kicked out of him. He got the absolute crap kicked out of him, and there was times where he was not able to do the things that he did, and then you saw that the teams were forcing him to his offside every single time. You saw that he the route trees that our wide receivers were being asked to run were so not creative. And it led to, Jalen Hurts had time in the pocket, but then he also had no way to throw the ball, which means he was forced to run. And that's where he was taking a lot of the hits. I think you need more of Swift and a power back. Yeah. I think that the way that this team is going to be the most successful, Andrew, is you're going to have a back like DeAndre Swift, who is going to be your bulk back. And then you're going to have a guy who is going to bash into the line a little bit and turn those 3-4 yard carries into 5-6 yard carries. The ones who are going to wear down the defensive linemen. I think that's going to be really important. DG, I feel, is going to have a career year. Yeah, Goddard should have an all-pro year if he can stay healthy and if he can actually be utilized, which Max is saying the same thing, especially when Hurt relies on his tight ends so much. So if Swift doesn't come back, could you see Howie signing Henry or Saquon? DJ, I am going to unequivocally say I do not see him signing either of those players, and I'm going to tell you why. If the Eagles were not willing to spend big money on Miles Sanders, who was drafted by this team and was a pretty solid back until he got to Carolina, if they are not willing to spend money on a homegrown guy like DeAndre Swift, who had pretty low mileage, why would they go out and they sign a guy like Derrick Henry, who took a massive step back this year and has a ton of tread on the tires, and Saquon Barkley, who honestly should have been the one that got the big deal instead of Daniel Jones. But again, you're talking about guys who are going to get paid huge, absurd, obscene running back amounts of money, not big contracts like you'd pay a quarterback or a lineman or a wide receiver, but they're going to get the top amount of running back money. And if Howie's not willing to commit to DeAndre Swift, who was, in my opinion, better than Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley, he's not going to spend that kind of money on he's not going to spend that kind of money on guys who, like Max is saying, give off DeMarco Murray vibes. Yeah, guy was just trying to collect that last contract before retirement. That's just how I feel. I mean, again, I could be right, it could be wrong. We'll kind of see in time. But I don't see a big name running back happening. I would actually see a big name linebacker before a big name running back. Johnny had to dip out, got parental duty. So a couple of things. So again, phenomenal comments from everybody. I mean, you guys were crushing it. We know that the offseason gets tough as far as keeping content going, but hey, this is what we have to talk about. Next week, we get to talk about the Senior Bowl, which is happening this week. Obviously, the Eagles are looking into we're going to need to put some rookies on this team. So we do have Senior Bowl representatives down there. Obviously, I saw a picture of Big Dom down there. So, if Big Dom is down there, then the Eagles are looking at some players. So we're going to talk about Senior Bowl stuff. We are not going to spend any time talking about the Pro Bowl because the Pro Bowl has turned into an absolute joke. But with that being said, congratulations to the newest additions to the Pro Bowl, which are Darius Slay and Jalen Hurts. Again, if it was still the actual physical Pro Bowl with pads and stuff, I would say both those guys should sit out and rehab, but they're playing flag football and they're catching passes, jumping onto mats. So if that's your cup of tea, enjoy it. But next week, we'll be talking about the Senior Bowl. Make sure you are liking, subscribing, doing all that, clicking on that notification button so you can know when we go live. We appreciate all the comments. We appreciate all the feedback. Johnny dipped out. Like I said, I am Chip at Chip for the Birds and Umpire Stories as we end every show here on the AAT Weekly Report. We're going to end with a very positive and a very happy Go Birds.
This is Matt Ware. Hey, for all the Eagle content you need, go follow All About the Birds. They do a damn thing. Check them out.
Hey, Eagles fans, I may be in Tampa, but I know where to find the best Eagles content out there. Check out my friends at All About the Birds.
Philadelphia, what's up? This your boy Freddie Mitchell, a.k.a. Fred X. It's all about the bird.
All birds all the time. All birds all the time.
All About the Birds provides you with weekly analysis, game recaps, informative interviews, and it's all birds all the time.